Greetings, conservatives. This is your humble host, John Moraga, and we are back with more ConservaCast. We look forward to keeping you informed with the latest and most relevant commentary of conservative issues. So without further ado, here are a few topics I'd like to discuss.
Am I really Mexican? Hey folks, I hope you've enjoyed your Thanksgiving weekend and you've had a blessed time with friends and family, and you haven't overstuffed yourself, excuse the pun. But today's podcast is going to focus on pretty much a single topic. I'm going to veer off here and there, but I've entitled this, Am I Really Mexican? Now, that's kind of a confusing title because it could either mean, am I actually Mexican or am I extremely Mexican? And let me break that down just a little bit and tie it into what may have been a Thanksgiving holiday discussion. And there were a number that, more than usual, that I've overheard and engaged in, and ironically, it ties into a change in conversation and a collective conversation in our society. Particularly, some of you may be familiar with how the conversation is questioning the political correctness of Thanksgiving, and whether or not it's actually a suppressing type of holiday, considering it was originated with a traditional, loosely based in reality, coming together of pilgrims and indigenous Native Americans who celebrated a time of feasting and thanks, pretty much to their respective God or a higher power. Obviously, the pilgrims would have thanked the Judeo-Christian God, and the Native Americans may have given praise or thanks to their own respective religious form of God. And there's a very convoluted progression of how that might have come about, and whether or not the founding of this country is in and of itself a type of a politically incorrect and or racist founding, considering there was a lot of territorial conflict in order to establish this country. So kind of tangentially, if that's the correct word to use, I'm going to tie in the question that I posed in the offset here. Am I really Mexican? Am I actually a Mexican, as in a person of Mexican citizenry, a Mexican nationalist, a person who is from Mexico? Or am I a person who is extremely, really, culturally Mexican? Now, those two different tiers of questions actually are assuming that I am not anything else. So let me back up here just a little bit. What I'm trying to get at is, I am young enough to be among the questioning of our cultural identities and trying to put labels on people and hyphenated Americans, African American, Mexican American, Yugoslavian American, you name it, and everybody is trying to have a hyphenated identity of their ethnicity. I'm also old enough to know what it was like to just state your cultural, ethnic background without having to qualify that you were also American. You didn't need to, it wasn't assumed that by claiming your ethnic, cultural background, that you were minimizing your American identity. What I mean is, there was a time in this country, it seems to have quickly passed, and there are still some people who understand this, but there was a time when you could easily say, I'm Italian, I'm Irish, I'm Chinese. And you wouldn't have to qualify that you were an American. You didn't have to specify your cultural identity first and then qualify that your citizenship is American. It's unfortunate because we've gone away from having a sense of pride in our ethnic backgrounds to almost a sense of shame to have to identify and qualify our ethnicity separate from our citizenship. So as I said, you could say, "Oh, I'm Irish," and people would assume, "Okay, well, you're Irish culturally, you're Irish ethnically, your ancestors may have been Irish." And in the case of myself, I could very easily say, "I'm Mexican," without it being assumed that I am a Mexican national, I am a Mexican citizen. I am culturally Mexican. I am ethnically Mexican. My ancestors may have come from Mexico, and because of that, there are a lot of quote unquote Mexican tendencies in my family and in my own personal life. That's sad. It's unfortunate. Now, I say this because, as I said, I'm kind of in that middle generation of knowing what it was like to be a small child and even early adolescence, of being able to just state that I am Mexican, and people understood, especially by speaking fluent English and having American parents who spoke fluent English, that we were culturally Mexican. We ate Mexican foods. We spoke, if you will, Spanglish in our home, kind of half Spanish and half English in our home. There were sayings, there were expressions, there were senses, types of humor that may have been considered Mexican. No more different than a ethnically Chinese family living in America, an ethnically Italian, Japanese, Korean, any type of ethnic family living in America. It was a very beautiful thing, especially growing up in California. We are very diverse. There are many different cultures. But unfortunately, rather than becoming a melting pot, we've started to, I'll use a term that the media personality Mark Levin has often used, we've become balkanized. In other words, instead of becoming a melting pot and blending in together and sharing some of our culture, people have started to separate into their own little groups and cliques and have to identify with their groups and ethnic backgrounds before actually identifying as American. Now, I've mentioned more than enough times and more than a few times that I've served in the military. And you probably can't find a better institution than the United States military that demonstrates how a melting pot of ethnic cultures functions. When you're training, when you're doing a course, or when you're just among your peers, there are obvious differences in skin color and features and accents. But ultimately, we get beyond that and very quickly work in harmony as a unit, as a squad, as a flight. Our mission is all the same. Our skin color, our culture, our background, our ethnicities quickly dissipate when we all have the same mission to accomplish. And that's kind of how I grew up as a small child in early adolescence, as I said, in school and in the normal every day-to-day life in stores and malls. Now, that didn't mean that everybody was technically colorblind. And that was a good thing. We were able to embrace our individual ethnic backgrounds, our cultural backgrounds, our familial heritage without having it take priority over our American citizenship. Both of my parents had at least graduated high school. My father was more highly educated. He worked for an aerospace company and had a master's degree. I myself have gone to college. And so we fully embraced the American culture and system and way of life because we've had a number of generations who have lived in this country, born in this country. My father also fought in Vietnam in the U.S. Army. He was drafted. His father before him was a resident of Arizona and had been born in Arizona. And I mean, I don't want to trace all of my heritage back, but the fact is, as many generations as I have here, as my family goes back, we were still able to embrace our Mexican heritage. But we didn't flaunt it. We weren't raising Mexican flags. On the contrary, we were very much American. We had a sense of American pride. We understood the value of this country. So my dad responded to being drafted to the Vietnam War. I voluntarily enlisted into the U.S. Air Force. We had an understanding that this country is the greatest country on earth. And so it would be an insult. It'd be a ridiculous sentiment to put our ethnicity before our citizenship and our birth home. Unfortunately, the generation younger than me and subsequent generations after have gradually or expeditiously, however you may see it in your perspective, has moved far away from that type of compartmentalization of their identity. And again, loosely tying this into this past Thanksgiving holiday weekend, I don't recall a time when I had seen so many reports, overheard so many conversations, actually engaged in some conversations about the political correctness of Thanksgiving based on ethnicity and race and our historical founding. That is quite unfortunate. It's sad, really. And I say this as a conservative. Yes, that's right. Obviously, those of you who have listened to this podcast or know about Conservatives Corner have followed us up to this point and know that I am essentially, well, I'd like to think at least, I am single-handedly defining conservatism in as articulate of a way as I know how. I don't think that's a word, articulative, but my point is, I am a conservative of conservatives, but I still have the ability to compartmentalize my ethnicity. I can still freely and proudly say that I am Mexican without denying my American citizenship. Again, without going further back into my own family history, there is no denying my American purity, so to speak. But I extend the same liberty to any other ethnicity. Any Asian, African, European ethnic heritage. I think it's a shame that we can't embrace those without having to get into political correctness, without having to hyphenate our ethnicities. I recognize I am not the first and won't be the last person to address this. But it just hit me after these holidays, and I felt the need to kind of express that, especially in this heated political culture. And there are a handful of other quote-unquote Mexican conservatives who are out there. One that comes to mind is a personality who writes for, I think it is Conservative Review. I think he goes by the name of Super Mexican. And I think he spells it SOOPERMEXICAN, I believe is the spelling. And we are out there. In fact, it's a shame that there aren't more Mexican conservatives. And when I say Mexican, I say it in the old traditional sense of Mexican culturally. Because there is a sense of conservative values among people of Mexican ancestry and heritage. There is a lot of family value. There is a lot of fiscal conservative values. There is a lot of patriotism that is embedded within the ethnically, culturally Mexican community within this country. Unfortunately, the liberals and the left have done a very, very effective job in indoctrinating a large portion of otherwise uninformed ethnically Mexican Americans. I don't use the term with a hyphen as much as trying to make the point that those who would identify as ethnically Mexican in this country, citizens, American-born citizens, have been brainwashed or indoctrinated into the left-wing liberal ideology. Not all, obviously. I'm here. I am a voice crying in the wilderness, trying to espouse the efficacy, the value of conservative ideas. Again, just a plug of our three pillars: biblical precedent, natural law, and federalism, and trying to give the basics of conservatism and reintroduce not just Mexicans of ethnic, culturally Mexican Americans, but all Americans. Again, European, Asian, African, ethnic Americans. But obviously, I have more of a direct connection to others who may have the same type of historical identity as myself. Now, understanding this, I hope to, in this pursuit of trying to articulate conservative ideas and values, reach out to those who may feel a bit confused or uncertain of politics or ideas and bring them into the fold, so to speak. Trying to provide a common understanding of what we believe and tying it into how they were raised, whether they understood it or not, whether it's a family tie, a religious moral compass, a sense of a duty to our country. Those types of ideas are very common. And again, by no means am I claiming to be the only or just a handful of ethnically Mexican American conservatives in this country. But it's a shame that there's far fewer than there should be. But then again, come to think of it, that's kind of the case with all Americans. There are far less conservatives than there should be as a whole, irrespective of our ethnic culture and background. But I just wanted to bring that home into what was on my mind this past Thanksgiving holiday. Now, at the offset of this, I asked, am I really Mexican? Meaning, as I said, am I really a Mexican or am I extremely Mexican? Well, the first I think I've kind of just gone over. I am not a Mexican citizen or a Mexican national. I have several generations here in this country. I've served in our military. My father served in the military. So I wouldn't say that I'm actually Mexican textbook definition of a Mexican as much as ethnically, culturally Mexican. But am I extremely Mexican? Well, that is where some would say probably not, in that my Spanish is not, let's just say it's quite embarrassing. I know limited Spanish. I took a little bit in high school and I tried to practice among some peers, but I would not want to be airlifted and dropped off the middle of Mexico or anywhere in South America to try and survive without a translator. Let's just put it that way. I do, however, have a deep, deep, deep love for Mexican foods. But I think that goes across any kind of cultural lines. There are some of those who don't actually prefer or like Mexican foods, especially avocados and guacamole. But I definitely love the spice. I eat habaneros like candy, raw, and will just kind of have those on the side of things. So I can definitely take the heat. And you name it, I'm pretty okay with it. Although I don't eat pork or what is called carnitas, or even chicharrones or some things. But there are plenty of other recipes and foods that I do enjoy. And so there is, as I said, a very deep cultural identity of a Mexican heritage and culture. Understanding that there is a need to bring in as many people to the conservative way of thinking and understanding the world and politics at large. I want to try and make a more concerted effort this coming year without making an actual New Year's resolution, so to speak. I want to make more of a concerted effort to try and reach out to those who may identify ethnically as Mexican and try and tie the politically conservative ideas to that community, my community. And this is in no way to try and play a type of race politics or identity politics by any means. In fact, on the contrary, it's an attempt to try and counter that by having inclusion, by demonstrating the ability of a sense of Americanism, a sense of patriotism. It was a term called assimilation. Unfortunately, assimilation has joined the ranks of a four-lettered expletive, a type of curse word, a foul word that's used among politically correct liberals who don't find the need for people to assimilate into our country, learn the language, understand our civics, have an idea of our history, embrace the norms, the types of unwritten rules, so to speak, and just there's a formal way of assimilating and an informal way of assimilating and just trying to embrace the American ideal. So I want to try and not necessarily offer a formal type of assimilation, but still reach out and do some outreach to other ethnically Mexican Americans within my immediate community or my extended community, however far this ConservaCast may reach, however influential I may be to those listening to it and to the people that they may reach. But it was just sitting on my mind after having plentiful food and giving thanks to God about this past holiday weekend. and looking forward to 2019 right around the corner, and trying to see what else can be done, how else I can be more effective, and trying to expand the conservative idea, the conservative tenets, the 3 pillars of conservatism that Conservatives Corner has established, while at the same time embracing this wonderful country, this beautiful country that has given us so much and that is still willing to give us if we are willing to fight the good fight, if we are willing to stand our ground, stand for something or fall for anything, as my old man would say. Some of you may know that saying. So once again, I hope you've enjoyed your Thanksgiving holiday and had some time to reflect. I'd like to invite you to join my efforts coming up in this 2019 year. It's right around the corner, and I look forward to what we can do together in trying to expand our voice and help spread the ideals of conservatism and champion conservative values. If you haven't already, please check us out at GoFundMe.com/Conservatives Corner. GoFundMe.com/Conservatives Corner. Once again, that's GoFundMe.com/Conservatives Corner. Thanks for joining us once again, and we hope you will invite your friends and family to join us in our efforts to champion conservatism for generations to come.
But it would be nothing, not a woman or a girl.